right. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and good night. Welcome to the live edition of the Fly With Us podcast. This podcast is bringing the art of conversation, self love, self care, mental health care and protection, life lessons, love lessons, and everything in between. Today, we kick off our hip hop series talking about knowledge and hip hop. We got special guests joining us. They'll be popping in and out throughout the broadcast. I'm your girl, Lady Bounce.
And I am Picket Fence. Today's Mindfulness Minute is research stuff. Learning has been widely documented as a key variable when it comes to health and longevity. When people are engaged in doing and learning new things, their well-being and happiness increase significantly. Find something you have always wanted to know about and set out to research it. Learn how it works, where it came from, what it does, anything and everything you can. Expand your mind and not just on superficial level. Really explore this new thing with veracity. Your mind and your mood will thank you. Word up.
Word up.
So
All
the
right,
reason I
so
picked that the reason I picked
yeah, go
that
ahead.
mindfulness minute today is because we're talking about the lost element of hip hop, which is knowledge. During my brief stint in the Zulu Nation, one of the things that was added to the other elements that we still talk about, which is breakdance and DJ and MC and graffiti. But the fifth element they added was knowledge. And we used to receive a plethora of books through our emails, PDAs on different topics of knowledge. And it seems today that that element has been forgotten. So our first special guest that is here with us now, David Archer, I'm going to kick that off to you and ask you, why do you think knowledge is no longer a part of the hip hop elements?
Okay, well, thank you again for having me on the show. And I'll just give my own interpretation. This may not be the one interpretation that's out there. And I come from a perspective where I'm an anti-racist psychotherapist and a lover of hip hop music. But that love affair was short-lived because there's something that changed. And I think that money is something that's going to change any type of artist. So a lot of times, I believe when people were making hip hop in the early 90s, there was something very new that was happening. There was something that was very, you were able to say, like, you know, F the police and all this stuff. Like there was just a lot of stuff that was happening in it. I was also a big fan of Tribe Called Quest because I liked the fact that they didn't fit into any specific type of genre that was there. But I felt that although Phife Dawg did have some battle raps, Q-Tip did have some types of I felt there was some knowledge that was even in the way how they did it. It was a different type of hip hop music. De La Soul, all of this. I really think that when it came to the clause of capitalism going into the music, I think that's what changed it. It was no longer about knowledge. It was more about how do you make a record that's going to sell to the greatest amount of people. There's already some studies that are out relating to this, as many people might know, or if you don't know, the greatest consumer of rap music is actually white people. So it's something interesting where the people who are making the music don't always look like the people who are consuming it. And the people who are paying for the music to be made are also white people as well. So there's something about how it became more about entertainment, more about selling records, rather than about keeping the elements of hip hop together. Because I don't know about a lot of present day hip hop, but I haven't seen a b-boy or b-girl I don't see the graffiti. I don't know if that's what's happening. I mean, I'm dating myself and making myself sound like an ancient person, which I kind of am. Only because I don't know about hip hop for the past 20 years, because after I started to be about being in the club, I was like, no, I'm done with this.
Mm-hmm.
I think one thing with that is that those other things do exist, but they became subcultures. Like there's still groups or graffiti artists, there's
Sure.
still b-boys and b-girls, but it seems like they're separated instead of being like in the beginning, they were all together and they were all part of the same culture. And it seems like, I don't know if one was not promoted enough, or the money wasn't there for one element or another, and those became subculture. So there's still graffiti competitions going on, and there's stores dedicated to selling art supplies just specifically for graffiti artists. And b-boys is now going to be in the next Olympics, and there was a b-boy was in the World Games, this past World Games. So why those things became the fragment, it started breaking off, I'm not for certain. I think, like you said, one big thing might have been money. There probably wasn't a lot of money in b-boying until recently, and now they have all these b-boy competitions. Same thing with graffiti. Now there's this big explosion in graffiti when it comes to skateboarders and things like that. But for some reason, I think there's a bigger picture that we may not have explored, of why it became so fragmented. And going back to knowledge, I think that we've seen in recent years, for some reason, that it's cool to be stupid. And I don't know why that is, but it's I'm an artist myself, and I have this bar in my mind all the time that's not on a song, that I just keep thinking about. It's like, they take the worst of us and bottle it up and give it to the world. And then they rebottle it and sell it back to us.
Yep.
And it's just, it's pretty wild just seeing that. I mean, especially if you're aware and you're watching it, it's like the most nonsense is the most popular thing now.
Oh yes. It's because the concept of blackophilia and blackophobia, these things are related. Is that there's the thing that sells the most in hip hop is the stereotype of the black person. This is the thing. So that's why when we talk about the elements of hip hop, I think that they've just been substituted. So maybe instead of like graffiti and like spray cans, it's like spraying bullets, you know what I mean? Or like instead of like the b-boy like dancing, it's really just about like prostitution or being able to sexualize like black women in this way. I think that it's really that the elements have just been substituted, and that because back in the day, I used to make hip hop music. So I used to be an underground artist, and I was intentional in that. So it was about like a decade I was making music and like performing and all that stuff, and like chilling with my bros, and my bros would make beats and all of these things. I think that technology did play a role. Not everyone was able to have like like we didn't have a DJ. I didn't have like the ability to make to like use records. I didn't have access to records, but everyone had a computer at the time, so we were able to make beats digitally with synths and like samples and all that stuff. What was interesting for me is that I made music because I didn't like the music that was out there. So I'm from Canada, okay, I'm Montreal, Canada, and what happened was there was a lot of rappers who were imitating American accents because our accent isn't cool enough. So it's the same thing as that. We were trying to shape ourselves into being like American artists, and especially not even just American artists, but like the stereotype of what the black rapper is supposed to be. So, you know, we would use the N-word because the N-word, again, we were trying to reclaim it, which I don't agree with. I don't think you can reclaim something that's been used to oppress our ancestors. But again, that's another element of how rap music is right now. And it's like, I came from a small town, and we didn't have a lot of drug dealers. Like the biggest drug dealer was just the local pharmacist. And so like we weren't able to kind of translate it in that way. So we just imagined that we were something that was non-existent by trying to be gangster in a suburb. So I really believe that part of the problem is that the people who buy the music, and the way to market the music is by consuming the stereotype. We need to dumb it down. It's not about consuming intelligence or consuming wisdom. It's about being able to look out from the outside and be like, wow, these black people are they're so violent, they're so hypersexual, and their music is violent, but it's never directed towards me because they're using the N-word. So I can consume it from a distance, and I can participate in blackness without needing to participate in their struggle. So it doesn't need to be about racial justice. It doesn't need to be about police brutality. It doesn't need to be about the intellectual concepts. It just needs to be something that's safe enough where I could kind of plug in, kind of like how Call of Duty is a very popular video game. Grand Theft Auto, these are very popular video games because of their violent content. So I could check it out and not feel as if I'm personally offended. So they will always say, direct their anger towards the N-word, but never towards a white person. And I feel it's a cardinal rule in gangster music. It has to be that we are not directing our anger towards the system that has enabled the ghettos to exist in the first place.
I like that. That's a bar. That's something to really, really ponder and think about. And I don't want to get too deep into what I'm about to say. I just want to briefly touch about it. When you talked about the knowledge and dumbing it down, it just instantly, because it's been in the news so heavily the last few days, the Kyrie Irving thing. Mm-hmm. And another bar, since this thing is, like I said, I've been paying a lot of attention to it just briefly, because I don't want it to consume me, but it makes me think of, it's better to live in someone else's lie than to live in your own truth. And I made a couple comments to different of my friends that I don't agree with his religious practice. I won't even say agree, like that's not my path. His religious practice is not my path. But we all have the internet now, and people are able to research and study different things. And just briefly looking over, it doesn't seem to me that he's being anti-Semitic, because if he's claiming to be a real Jew, a real quote unquote, a real Jew, then how can he be anti-Semitic? And now there's all this big thing about he has to come back and work, play basketball. He has to apologize. He has to condemn this movie and book that he had been reading during quarantine. He has to meet with the Jewish leaders of the city that he plays basketball in. And he has to do all these things. And then I saw another meme about all the stuff that he has charitably done over the last few years. And then listening to the press conference where he several times continually says, I don't mean to offend anybody. This is the research I've seen. This is the research that I've read. And I have friends of all walks of life. So why is it that we aren't allowed to tell our own stories, is what I've been getting from this. And then you have his counterparts, his peers coming on TV calling him an idiot just for having a different opinion or a different thought process. And it's just almost maddening. That's why I haven't paid a lot of attention to it, but just seeing that go on, it's like, that shows you they don't want you to have knowledge. At least to me, it seems like they don't want you to have knowledge. What you study, what you learn is automatically wrong.
Mm-hmm. For me, like, I don't know the specifics about this case as well, because I just feel every week there's another Black person that we're supposed to be upset about. I feel if it's not Kanye West, it'll be another person. But I feel that even that serves a function, and the function is complete distraction. Okay, is that realistically? I mean, I know that we're talking about hip hop, but realistically, though, even though I'm an anti-racist and I specialize in trauma and all these things, Russia is at war with Ukraine and kind of at war with the United States behind the scenes and all that. So at any point, someone could just press a button and then a nuclear explosion is the last thing that we see. Not to traumatize anyone, not to scare anybody about this, but I really believe that with hip hop music, to bring it back, is that we got caught up in distractions as well. Is that I think maybe in the early 90s, I think that there were like some pivotal times around the time when the Malcolm X movie was coming out and like these Spike Lee movies. So there was a specific critical moment that was there, but I do think that the distractions got us off base. And now like rap music, it doesn't mean the same thing as it did back in the day. And I think you said you're going to have some presentation or some podcasts that you guys are going to talk about ageism and all of those things. And I'm glad that you're going to speak about that, because I feel it's like Black men are not able to be elders in white racist society. That Black men, your age you have to be young. Well, there's something, even with white people as well, there's a fascination in this culture of being young all the time, of like, you know, being like sexy and being like super attractive and all these things. But there's not so much of a focus on that accumulation of knowledge. Like, even when we think about it, how many we're able to count an unlimited amount of basketball players who speak for behalf of our race, okay, which is strange. We could count like these entertainers who speak on behalf of all Black people. I'm like, who elected these people to be this? But for some reason, there's not a Black intellectual who does the same in our culture, you know? And when I say our culture, as you know, Canadians, we have boring news. You Americans, you guys have exciting news where there's explosions and white people climbing buildings during the Capitol protests and wearing animal skins. So the thing is, when I say our culture, I mean that it's a general Western problem that exists. Is there's this fascination with keeping Black people young, keeping Black people like in a box. So while I didn't see the Kylie Irving thing, I haven't taken a lot of time to study it. I like to take that backup view and just be like, well, why is it that a Black man again is the subject of all of our conversations, even though Black people there's more white people in the United States than Black people. So there's a purpose for why the suffering gets projected into us. Black people didn't invent Nazism, but they're being lumped in with anti-Semitism. And I'm like, really? You're telling me you got some people that are trying to run your offices in the Republican Party who are clearly racist and clearly want to destroy the whole country. And the biggest focus right now is a basketball player or a rapper. It's fascinating, and it's a distraction.
Yeah, it's baffling. It's absolutely baffling. Go ahead, Lady Bounce. You go ahead.
Yeah.
I mean, well, I was just like, I'm listening to you guys and I'm taking it all in because I'm thinking about the things that you're saying from an educator's perspective and the way that my students identify with rap music and the way that they consume it. I mean, and when I say consume it, I mean they drink it in with their entire soul and existence, and they really think that this is how it is or this is how things are, and they glorify it, you know, to the point where like we have, you know, issues at school with like students following just basic rules because the music they listen to says, you know, who gonna check me, or, you know, what authority do you have over me? So we have a lot of buck in the system, and it's because of, you know, the music isn't telling you, hey, being smart is what it is, being respectful is what it is, and no, this isn't your mother, but this is somebody's mother. And so the way that you talk to this teacher, if you don't talk to your own mother that way, then you should automatically have like a button that says, no, this ain't the move, or no, this isn't what I should say. But they listen to, you know, to these rappers, and they watch their lifestyles, and they even are basketball players, and they look up to these idols. And then you have people like, you know, what's his name? Charles Barkley, who his famous line is, I am not a role model. But you are a role model by the simple fact of who you are and the platform space that you occupy. Right. So with that being said, do our basketball players, celebrities, rappers, you name it, do they have a responsibility to be knowledgeable, or are they allowed to just be free and say dumb stuff and do dumb stuff? And it's gonna check me. Are they allowed? Should they be allowed to just do that when people are watching, mainly kids?
I'm gonna let David Archer answer that, but I'm so glad that you just mentioned that whole Charles Barkley thing about I am not a role model, because he's been one of the main people that has been on TV calling Kyrie an idiot. He's been one of the main people on live TV calling this man an idiot for his beliefs. And after he had commercials and a whole campaign about not being a role model. And And like I said, I don't want to go into the Kyrie thing, but I'm gonna let you answer that, David.
Um, well, it's just that um, it's a little complicated because I'm thinking about it from, like, if I could bring it back to the hip hop thing for a second, because it's all the same concept that we're talking about.
Right.
It's like the way how black people are represented in culture, because that's what rap music, a lot of it was. A lot of, you'd see like some people saying, "Yo, I'm just talking about what it's like to be in the ghetto. I'm just talking about what it was like for me to kind of pay my bills and all these things." It's just that now a lot of these rappers are liars. Like, come on, like it can't be every single one of the rappers has 1,000 women and 1,000 bank accounts in offshore banking. If that's what they do. I don't know what they do any nowadays, but I don't know if the crypto. I don't know if they're talking about stuff like that. But anyways, the key thing though is we have to ask ourselves. I actually think that basketball players should be good at playing basketball, and I will be impressed when black basketball players are experts in history or in anti-racism or any of these things. My question, what we should do though, is we should not have to hold basketball players to this high standard that we don't hold up to hockey players. Like, I'm surprised because the racial differences in hockey, there's not a lot of black people there, but you're telling me there's no racist white people at all that have made the news? Like, there's no stories whatsoever about a racist white guy having a racist rant in hockey? Like, why is it that the biggest stories are consistently going to be us? And I think it's because blackophobia is linked with blackophilia. I think that the culture loves black people, and at the same time they're afraid of them. White people would love to get a tan every once in a while, but at the same time not to inherit the struggle of the darkened complexion. And I really, really believe that deep down, unconscious, deeper than all of this stuff, is because, remember, the first walking human, the first Homo sapiens sapien, was mitochondrial Eve, and she was a black woman from Africa. So even though white people exist as separate today, we know that deep down inside they share the same origin that we all do share. So there's kind of this anger that is towards black people. There's kind of this anger that's towards women as well. And I feel that a lot of it is wrapped up in the same thing. There's this fascination that exists with black people, but not with the aspect of themselves that's going to relate to being the cradle of civilization. If we talk about the black intelligence, we might start to think too much about, well, who was the first people to use paper and pen? The papyrus is an Egyptian creation. And when we think about, like, well, like, how far back were the first pyramids ever created? Greece wasn't even in existence, but Greece is supposed to be the I guess the beginning of knowledge and the philosophers and all of these things. So we have to keep it so that black people are constantly fighting against each other or are constantly distracted about fights among black people, or else we might have enough space, kind of like what happened in the pandemic, for us to take us a bit of time to meditate, to think about what blackness means for all of us, and we might gain the courage to collectively change the world. But I really do believe, though, that all of this energy that is directed towards black people saying the wrong things on TV, it's really to distract from the fact that there's a lot of other things that we should be caring about, including the climate, including the inflation and all these things. And the inflation is not caused by a black person saying anti-Semitic things, but that thing increases the price of all of our food that we're paying for. So I think that this collective outrage should really be towards the corporations that have ruined or attempted to ruin our hip hop music by trying to put profit before people. These businesses that are kind of borrowing time in the future and making it so that, you know, we can't even recycle, like recycling plastic doesn't even do anything. Like apparently 5% of the American plastics that are actually recyclable. So these are things that are a little too serious. So instead, let's focus on Charles Barkley. Instead, let's focus on a basketball going up and down when there's real problems that would be a little bit too problematic for maintaining this balance of white insecurity and black suffering. That's my answer. If that.
It's
I
dope.
like
Dope.
that, and it really does make a lot of sense. I think sometimes we put too much stock into things that don't matter, and because we do that, it does keep us distracted in a way. Because how
Mhm.
dare us, not even as Black people, but as people in general, how dare us, band together and realize how powerful we really are against the machine that tries to keep us separated. I mean, I have white friends that will ride just as hard for me as my Black friends. I've got white people in my family that will ride just as hard. But it's so easy, and it's such a basic it's such a basic argument to go, Black versus white or rich versus
Mhm.
poor.
Mhm.
It's like it just keeps us down here in this bottom basement level of thinking, because how dare us realize how powerful we really are, and how powerful we could be through uniting through music, because music is a universal language that kind of unites us all. There's no other entity on the planet that a white person can do just as good as a Black person, except when it comes to music and art and being creative. And instead of us embracing that and saying, hey, this is where it is, this is where we all should be, this is where we all want to be, it's so much easier to get caught up in that distractive, basement level. Hey, this is what it is, or this is what it ain't, and that's just that, and I'm okay with it. I don't like it, but I'm okay with it. I'm not gonna fight against it because why bother? And to me, I don't, because I work with young people, I can't subscribe to that philosophy, because things have to change. I have to empower these kids that I've been entrusted with to change the world and to see the bigger picture. But me, as an educator trying to do it, I'm fighting against this massive separation machine that I could never win against. And sometimes it is a little disheartening to keep staying in the fight, because it seems like people don't want better, people don't want to do better, when then I have to remind myself, like Pickett is always reminding me, it's programming. So we're fighting against the programming, and we don't have the money or the capital or even the intellectual capital to fight against the programming. So I guess my question then is, how do we find these artists that are fighting against the programming? Because our market is so flooded and saturated with those who are, you know, regurgitating everything that they're selling to
Sure.
us. Where are these artists that aren't just regurgitating what they're selling to us? How do we find those? How do we big up those people and put them back into the spotlight?
That's a good question. So I do not have the answer. I do not know the way. But I can always say there is, like, I don't know the one truth or the one perfect answer, but I can just give my answer for it. Um, I'll just say it. So I have a new book, okay? So I wrote a third book, and this book is called Racial Trauma Recovery. The reason why I bring this up is because I wouldn't be writing and doing my anti-racist psychotherapy things if I wasn't a hip hop artist first. When I was making hip hop, because the reason why I made hip hop music is because I loved the music so much that I wanted to make music that was just for me to listen to, and music that I loved, because as an artist, I just love to create things. In our culture and in our society, it's almost as if a lot of people are searching for the savior, or they're searching for someone to come rescue them. But I believe our responsibility is to rescue ourselves. We do have to be guided by the will of the ancestors, but ultimately it's up to us to create the thing we want to see in the world. It's like this, is that if the thing that doesn't serve us is not within vicinity, we must create the thing. And as a person who studied in my field is super white, and it's super exclusive in terms of who's a psychologist and who is the one with expertise and all of these things. So one day after those George Floyd protests, I just started to say, yo, I'm going to make my own practice. People are looking at me like, yo, what do you mean you're not going to work for somebody? What do you mean? Because like, I'm a Jamaican. Okay. And it's just that even in our cultures, the idea is that you need to have your work and all of these things. And because I'm a second generation immigrant, it was a little bit like, even some Black people were like, what do you mean you're going to have your own practice and all this stuff? But right now I'm becoming the person that I've always wanted to meet. And I encourage, since you said that you're an educator, of just knowing that your presence is making a big difference in the lives of those youth, just the fact that you exist there. And it doesn't even need to be something extraordinary in terms of writing a book or in terms of making a huge conference or any of that. It's the fact that we exist. The fact that I've written these books makes it so that there's something to at least counter that long that like incessant stream of BS that is trying to say what a Black person is meant to be. It's the fact that we exist that makes the difference. It's the fact that the will of our ancestors still continues. It's if we can continue the momentum of memory, of remembering we've been here before. We've experienced these types of things before, with media hyper focusing on Black people, saying bad things about it. Bill Cosby, Michael Jackson, like all of these things seem to happen in waves and patterns. But it's to us to understand that no one's going to develop the way to save ourselves outside of us. And if we can heal from our trauma that associates Blackness with this belief that we can't, or that there's not enough resources, or there's not enough of these opportunities, I think we can find solutions to reach across the different states, the imaginary lines that separate us, called Canada, America, Brazil, and all these things, and we can resolve these issues. I think it's really that we've been cut off from our past. Because we've been cut off from our past, we've been cut off from our traditions. As we've been cut off from our traditions, we lose a little bit of the momentum of memory, but it's up to us to reclaim our hip hop music and to make it ours, and to stop supporting any of these like terrible people who actually don't like Black people. I wanted to just say one thing about what Pickett was saying before. We can be Black and we can hate Black people at the same time. It's very easy to be a Black white supremacist. We know of many Candace Owens. We know of White Lives Matter types of things. Okay. I think that the thing that takes more courage is to be Black and to love yourself publicly and privately. I think that's the thing that is required of us. But I want to say, just the fact that we exist is the resistance. Just the fact that we can take care of ourselves is changing the narrative. And as long as we have breath, we are blessed.
Or I love it. I absolutely love it. I think that that's a great step forward. A great step forward. And I hope that this message starts to touch the ears that need it the most. Like Lady Bounce was saying, she's an educator during the day, and just seeing some of these kids, I think that they have lost hope. Yeah. And I think me, in my early stages of listening to hip hop, that's what it used to be, was hope. I think about hip hop and hip hop culture when I think about when you had groups, Poor Righteous Teacher, Brand Nubian, X-Clan, KRS-One. And then you had this fashion sense too, when you have like the African American College Alliance sweatshirts that everybody was wearing. You had the Cosby Show's Tree Branch Show, The Different World, and making it a thing that like college is the thing to do. Because up until around that era, I didn't think about college. I didn't think that far in the future. I think the real Friend Show, not the one that people know from NBC, but the original Friend Show, Living Single. I think that was an inspiration because you had all these group of young, intelligent black people. One worked on Wall Street. One had her own magazine. One was a boutique, and they didn't forget about the common person either. One was a handyman, and all of these different aspects of people. One was a lawyer. All these different types of people were friends, great friends with each other, and learned and fed off of each other. And I think that now we have this carbon copy situation where everybody is a carbon copy of the next person. Like I just explained, the original Friends, which is living single, you had all these different types of people: a lawyer, a magazine owner, a stockbroker, a handyman, a boutique shop person, a secretary, all these people that, like I said, that was an inspiration. Even though the show, the only element of hip hop was the magazine, hip hop culture inspired shows like that and inspired shows like Different World. And it taught a generation of kids, because I was still a teenager in that era, to strive towards more. And even though Bill Cosby has had his problematic situations, which we shouldn't big up him because of those things, we have to separate Bill Cosby, the person, from Heathcliff Huxtable. And what Heathcliff Huxtable was a symbolism of: a family man, a doctor who was married to a lawyer, and instilled his kids to strive to be more. And I think that we could have the shame of Bill Cosby, but still have the love and respect for Heathcliff Huxtable, and use that as a symbol. We don't have, as far as I'm seeing, great symbolism in the culture anymore. We have some, but it's underground. It's very suppressed and very underground and hard to find, especially in the digital age where, like when I was consuming music, I was going to the record store. People aren't going to the record store anymore. They're just taking what's on the radio. They're just taking what's in their news feed. And that's all that there is, when there's so much more out there to discover. And that was another reason for the Mindfulness Minute, is to research. We all have the internet, as my friend TK says. We all have the same internet, and we're all able to use it for more than just shucking and jiving. So yeah, I what you said made me think of that, and I think that there can be a change, and we just need to focus on that.
You got it. You see, there's always bars every time from both of you every time that I speak to the both of you. But it's really to say that is we are our ancestors. I think that each of us too, we are inspired to even have this conversation because there was hip hop, or there was music that left an impact on us. Okay, there was music that inspired us in some way, and so we have to understand that an African way of knowing involves the cyclical nature of time. That it's not just the fact that that the 90s was a way of like hip hop expressing itself, but knowing that there's a cycle of time that it eventually will bring us back to where we need to be. I think also is that for me, I was thinking about fashion and how it was interesting how maybe in the 60s, maybe the fashion was different, then in the 70s it was different, then the 80s was different, 90s was different, and I kind of feel that the 2000s to the 2020s I feel has generally been the same with fashion, that it's not as big a jump from the decades. So we need to know that it's not by accident, that it's on purpose. We need to know that the music staying this way is not by accident, it's on purpose. But just like as you said, we all share the same internet. I mean, I was making hip hop music for like 10 years, but no one has ever heard of me. And I wasn't trying to make it so that like I was intentionally trying to be in the underground, because I think that's where the possibilities are endless of what a Black person can be and what music can actually become. But I think it's that we have to stop trying to be spoon-fed our truth. We have to go out and get it. And when we can decide that, you know what, instead of being like as Lady Bounce was talking about before, Instead of liking this idea that we have to have this low level of intelligence, we have to start to like this idea of saying that it's cool not only to have knowledge and to seek knowledge, but also we don't need to follow what everyone else is trying to do out there, because that's what it is. The carbon copy is because everyone is saying this is how you become successful, if you look this way, if you sound this way. And we just need to make it cool again for us to love all aspects of ourselves, even the ones that are not as cool as the others. And ultimately we come to understand that the coolness is the fact that we can be different, that we don't have to be what other people think we should be. It's recognizing there's a difference between who they see us as and who we are to each other.
So
I like that. I like that a lot, because there are some moments where I tell Pickett all the time that this is how I know that I'm old, because the music that my students listen to, I automatically think is trash. Which I put myself in a perspective of like my parents when hip hop was budding and I was listening to it, and they were in my room going, "Turn that garbage off," or "Turn this off. It's Sunday. You're not listening to that." So I'm like, that's how I know I'm old, because their music is utter trash.
Yes.
But then some of the students I talk to, which is an interesting perspective, they will tell me, "Yeah, the music is trash, but this is all we got." And then for those kids, I kind of feel bad for them, because they're like, "Yeah, this is trash, and this song is it is depressing," or talking about having all of these women and all of these drugs it's not what I believe in, but it's all I have. It's the only music that I have access to. So I'm always sending them stuff or like showing them stuff. I'm like, come in my room and hang out with me, and you can listen to some real music, some real hip hop. I've got Pickett stories on the wall, and they're like, "Your husband is a rapper," and I'm like, "Yeah." So when they ask me, it's always funny, because they'll ask me, "Well, have you heard the new so-and-so song?" And I'm like, "No, I'm married to an MC and he doesn't let me listen to trash, so I don't know what that is." And they be like, "Your husband tells you what to listen to?" And I'm like, in a lot of ways, yeah. I'm like, in our house, I'm not allowed to listen to stuff like that. And they crack up laughing, because they're like, "Well, you're grown." I'm like, "Yeah, no," but he says no because it gets in your psyche. And then how would you feel if you came in on Monday morning and my brain was oozing out my ears because I was listening to your music, and then I'm not effective to you? And they like, okay, I see you. But it is funny in that sense that they can recognize that some of it is trash, and that they want something different, they want something better, they just don't know what to do. Like, they don't know how to get it.
Sure.
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, there's a lot of different answers for that. I think that one thing is, from my generation, is different from this generation now. It's, like I said, we have the internet, so they have access. It's just a matter of knowing to go out there and look for it.
Yeah.
But in my generation, like, these kids now, they don't want to really hear anything older. But in my generation, especially being in hip hop culture, we look for older stuff to check out. That's that's where we got the samples from. It's by listening to those older songs and trying to tap in their feelings of when they were making these songs, and then reinterpreting that. And I don't know if it's a parent thing, if parents aren't accessing their kids, letting their kids have access to this type of music. And I think that's probably something that's always been, because I know a lot of people my age, their parents didn't allow them to listen to rap and things like that. I have relatives that are like my age that I wasn't allowed to listen to this, and I was listening to everything. What my mom was listening to, I was going digging. I was going to the record store once a week, and a lot of the artists, I didn't even know who they were. I just thought the cover was cool, and I would cop the cover. I would just buy the cover, just buy the record based on covering, but there was always some type of gem in there. And I think that it's a little different because of social media and the internet. Like I said earlier, they're only gravitating to what's in their feed, and they aren't going out on their own doing the research.
So we had a couple of Facebook comments. First of all, Poetic sends her apologies. She was also having technical difficulties and kept popping in and out, but she is actively participating in the comment section. Mike Cooley told me that I was describing reverse ageism when I said that their music is trash, and I will accept that. I will embrace that, and I'm okay with that. But Poetic says that she feels like people are seeking conscious music. They don't know where to find it. And a lot of the artists are trying to keep up with the timing and what the world is consuming, which may not even necessarily be how they really feel. But this is the music that the world is consuming. So this is the music that I have to produce in order to stay relevant. So what are you guys' thoughts on that?
Shout out to Poetic. I'm sorry you're having technical difficulties, but I'm glad you brought that up, because one thing that I've recently heard from a younger guy at work was he saw my new video with Mike Cooley in there, Cooley the curator, and he told me, he listening to, like I said, the stuff that's in his feed, and he had knowledge enough to say that, yo, I'm thinking about doing some rapping. I'm like, you're like 20 something, you're just now thinking about doing. She's like, yeah, because if these guys are doing what they're doing, I could do it too. It's like he recognized that there wasn't a lot of substance in what they were doing. So I had to redirect them. And like I said earlier, there's stuff out there that's really, really good, really great. It's just a matter, you have to go out there and find it. And I'm a person that I used to be, like Lady Bounce just said, I used to automatically dismiss younger people's music. But now I at least listen to it, and then I'll say it's trash. After I listen to it, I can say, yeah, that's horrible. Because there are a lot of young people that out there that are conscious and have great music, but they aren't being elevated. They aren't being escalated to the top. And that might go back to what David was saying, is that that's for a reason that it's not being pushed to the top.
Yeah, 100%. What I wanted to say too is, I think it's a little strange, because these genres of music, the names that we give them, are not always created by us, and a lot of times they're created by companies and marketing companies that are going to say, this is what hip hop is, this is what rap is, this is what rock and roll is, etc., etc. When I was young, I used to see, like we were talking about, like skaters, and the skater kids would listen to like heavy metal and rap music and all this stuff. And I remember being told that white music was rock and roll, or that metal music was white music. So I could not listen to it. So I was supposed to not listen to these musics that involved guitars and all this. And the interesting thing is that even the first person, or the first groups that created punk music, they're black people. Like, these are black bands. Like, I think one of them is what's it called? I think their name was like Death, and another one was a proto-punk band.
Yeah, a band called Death. Yep.
Yeah,
a band called Death. Yeah.
And there was another proto-punk band that was like Jamaican. Like, so
that was Living
like
Color.
Living Color. That's
yes.
it.
Yes, that was their name.
So, but this is the thing though, is that we need to understand that we need to just like widen our lens about what good music is, and the music that is ours, and we need to claim the music that feels good for us. Because I think that I've been in this situation where with some of those youth of being like, yo, this is the only music that's out there, but we just need to understand that there is music that is being pushed onto us that may not necessarily be the music that is right for us. It's just interesting for me where when I was performing back in the day, and Lady Bounce, I want to say that I'm one of those people as well, that I'm at that point where what young people are listening to is garbage, so that does by default make me an older person. And I also want to say too is that when I was a younger person, I never liked what older people were doing, because I think it's natural and normal for adolescents to bad brains. Yes, there's someone from the comments just said this.
Yeah, Mike Cooley, Bad Brains and Fishbone. Got to give them props too. Fishbone.
Yeah, I forgot about them.
Yeah, so but that's the thing though, is that like I didn't even know that these bands existed. Yeah, claim the music that feels good to us. I didn't even know that these bands existed, so I didn't even know that as a black person, as a black teenager, that I could listen to music that came from my country. You know what I mean? Like I didn't even know that you know, when we think of Elvis, obviously Elvis like was one of the biggest, most famous plagiarizers of black music. So when we try to say that this is what black music is, we need to just know that this is music that belongs to all of us. And I just think that we need to widen our lens in terms of understanding that a lot of what tries to constrain the type of hip hop and the way how hip hop is manufactured, and it's up to us to fight back against it by learning to just love all music, because all music is beautiful except for country. I'm not a big fan of country music.
I'm not a big fan of country music either.
Not a big fan of
blasphemy from both of you.
No, but being real, man, being real is that, of course, like because I realized that when I was younger, it's like I would listen to hip hop music. My parents would listen to reggae music. So then, because they were older, I was like, this is old people music, so I don't listen to it. But then as I got older, I was like, yo, wait, it's good for me to know the music from where I come from. And it made me a better artist when I was able to say, yo, I'm going to put some reggae elements into my hip hop music. So I think teenagers must revolt against their parents. This is the way how teenagers are primed. This is the way how their brains work. But I think for us to become more fully human is for us to love the past, present, and the future, and to kind of widen our lens of what type of music we actually are able to consume.
I think that's dope. And you know, thinking about the younger generation too, we recently watched a documentary on Kid Cudi, and I guess during the time that Kid Cudi was starting to have his rise in fame and success, was probably during that time before I started hanging with Mike Cooley, and I kind of was shutting off just anybody of that generation. And I think, not just speaking of music, I was doing that period. You know, sad to say, I was doing that period. Because watching that documentary, I still don't think a lot of the artists that are on there's music is good, and I've listened to it now. But I think more importantly, there was a time that something seriously happened that I missed because I wasn't involved with it. And what I missed was all of these kids being so depressed and full of self-hatred and anxiety, and the during the era of children being super over medicated, it changed them psychologically. And you know, because I was thinking about watching his story and then watching the artist that came under him being interviewed for his story and how he was an inspiration to him about his hard depression and anxiety. And I was thinking, I was like, I had a rough life as a kid, but I wasn't depressed. I loved it. Absolutely loved it. I lived in the projects, and the only thing I didn't love was seeing all that violence and drugs. But I still was a nerd at heart. I was still going to the record store. I was still reading comic books, and I was still active in sports, and I wasn't depressed. The only thing that was depressing is seeing these adults acting such a wild behavior, people shooting and stabbing each other, and my friends' parents were on drugs and stuff. I think one reason was I was fortunate enough to have a lot older parent. My mother was 38 when she had me, and that wasn't real late in the 70s. Having a kid at that age was considered late having a kid. So she wasn't involved in any of those things. Most of my friends' parents were my siblings' age. I have a siblings 14 years older than me, and one is 11 years old. So my friends' parents were their age, and that was the only thing that was really depressing and hard to deal with, was seeing that. But other than that, I was pretty happy. But watching that movie, I was like, man, there was some time in, I guess, late 90s throughout the mid first section of the 2000s that I know kids were getting medicated. We had a kid that ourselves that we took him to the doctor. Doctor didn't even look at him. It was just like Requiem from a Dream. If you ever seen that movie, he didn't even look at him. He was just trying to push us some pills. Like,
reached
here, give
around
him
behind
this.
them.
Yeah, reached behind him,
Wow.
grabbed some stuff off his shelf, and was like, here, give this to him. And we got home and was like, it's going in the trash.
Oh man, wow. Yo, I just want to say, because what you're talking about relates to Dr. Rita Walker's book, The Unapologetic Guide to Black Mental Health, because she's talking about how it's like recently there's higher rates of like depression and suicide with Black males, with Black youth. And we used to not have such high levels of Black suicide rates in the United States, but there have been some changes that have been taking around the turn of the millennium, I think. And also is that like there's higher rates of opioid use, my mistake, opioid use, like the fentanyl and all them things. And that I feel is also a difference when I listen to hip hop music from back in the day, is that they weren't talking about popping pills as much as, from what I remember, they weren't necessarily talking about popping pills in the 90s. But there are some things that are taking place. And what I think Dr. Rita Walker is talking about is we just need to get back in touch with our roots, even though there is this idea of like the internet being shared and that there's more access to information. A lot of Black people feel as if they cannot necessarily connect to an authentic form of Blackness. I think that part of the reason why each of us are here, we probably had some elders who did steer us on the right path, or kept us to be able to like who we were and who we're meant to be. But I have to say, I feel it's harder to be raised up in this internet age than when I was younger. Because like back in the day, you're talking about comic book. I had my Nintendo and all that stuff, and my Super Nintendo. These were things that I looked forward to. Now I feel like it's almost like, if I'm going to talk about video games, it's like whenever there's a new console that comes out, it's just replacing the old console that was already awesome with its graphics and all that stuff. So it's like, I feel that we got so good at being able to make things great that now everything's boring. So like even like music is kind of standard right now. Like I don't know if there's going to be like anyone who's going to be able to challenge like who can be better than like a Marvin Gaye or any of these things right now, because everything is so standardized and everything is so polished. Even the mixes for hip hop music, I feel, and like a lot of music right now, everything's so perfect all the time. But I used to love to listen to those underground records. Eastern Conference All Stars was actually like Jakida Motormouth. I don't know if anyone on your
okay.
All right, cool. All right, cool. So I was interested in those artists because I just felt that they were just doing things very differently. Even Mos Def and like Talib Kweli and all of them. But just to go onto that topic is really like hip hop a lot of times is just a reflection of what people are going through. And when we see that the quality of the music is decreasing to the point where even the young people are like, yo, maybe our music is not that good, it's because there's something in our society that's kind of sick rather than our children being sick. Talking about that example of the doctor reaching back and taking the pills, a lot of people are overprescribed medication in terms of why this opioid crisis is taking place. But we have to start to think, why is it that the society is sick in this way? And I refuse to blame our Black brothers and sisters. I refuse to blame the youth. I think that there's something that is a problem, but we are always going to be focused on these distractions until we get to the root of it and solve it.
I agree 100%, because I think about, as we're always talking, and me and Pickett talk a lot about how people who have nothing seem to be happier than the people who have everything. And I think one of the reasons why that is because the people who have everything have to keep working and fighting and trudging through life to maintain these things. Whereas the people who have nothing are used to it and they've gotten comfortable and complacent and even in their thought that I don't need this, I've been okay all this time without it. So it's definitely, kind of keep it up with the Joneses in some ways, but also Like I remember, like, you know, Picky said, you know, being poor, it wasn't a big deal. Like I didn't know I was poor until I got to school and the other kids told me I was poor, or I looked
Mhm.
at their clothes and, you know, went to their houses and things. I'm like, I didn't realize I was poor until somebody else put the lens on it, if that makes sense. But we were happy. Like we didn't have a lot, we didn't do a lot, and it was okay. We had our one big, I mean, first of all, I have 8 brothers and sisters. So we had our one big family outing a year where we went to Kings Island or Americana or, you know, something like that. And then we had our big, you know, holiday dinners and stuff. We always had what we needed and not necessarily what we wanted. And then sometimes I always, you know, I think back on those times and I go, gosh, I was so much happier then. Like life was so
Mm.
much simpler then. And now I've got bills, I've got 2 grown kids, you know, trying to support one in college, trying to support one, you know, through working to move out and be on his own, and caught up in like this rat race, and then the programming, it's all too much. So then
Mhm.
we do seek out these mind altering substances, the drugs, the pills, the anything that gives us an escape or gives us some kind of relief from being in this rat race that in some ways we've put ourselves in, but at the same time we didn't. And so we just keep going and going in this cycle. And you were talking about, you know, the opioids. Fun fact, not so fun fact, the state that we live in is actually the opioid capital of the world.
Oh wow.
And yeah, and because we
Interesting.
have 5 major highways that go through our state, we're a huge state for trafficking those opioids and the fentanyl and everything.
Wow.
And per capita, we have more deaths due to fentanyl and opioids than any other state in the United States, which is crazy.
Yeah, our state is Ohio, which has always been known as the heart of it all. It sits like a
Mm.
heart when you look at a map of the United States,
Mhm.
and that used to be for a good reason. It used to be because all the major companies, their distribution centers were here. You had GM and Chrysler, their main plants were here, but now it's for a totally different reason.
Oh man.
Yeah.
Wow.
I mean, when you
Yeah.
think about the real Rick Ross, not the rapper Rick Ross, but the real Rick Ross, is that is how he expanded his empires when he came to Ohio.
Wow.
Yeah,
Wow.
pretty crazy.
But yeah. But again, it's that, like, when we think about an opioid, what it does is it stops you from feeling pain. And we need to just think again, like, what is the real scale? What is the real scope of the pain that all of us are going through, that is in the, like, that the youth are being affected by, that makes it so that they turn to these drugs in the first place? Because the person who suffers from an addiction is not doing it for an illogical reason. There's always a reason for why a person is going to use a specific drug. There's certain people who get addicted to certain types of drugs because of what the drug gives them. But when it's at that level, because we know that there's enough people that are dying from opioid abuse, we know that this is an overwhelming thing. It's just, we need to really get to the cause of it. And I believe the society itself is traumatized, and the society itself bleeds its trauma into us, and we inherit these things. I think that when I'm talking about racism, or even like white racist, I think that many white people are not even racist, but it's just that they've inherited this belief that they are white when they are not considered as white people, because the people who are really running this thing are just using them as pawns, but they inherit these beliefs. We also, as Black people, we inherit some beliefs that are not of service to us as well. I think there's recent studies that say that 70% of Black people in the States are actually kind of like middle class, but we are always associated with poverty. And it's just interesting that when we actually look at the numbers, it's not, certain things are not exactly as they seem. So what I do want to say, though, is that we just need to be aware of the distractions. The uncomfortable truths are the things that people don't really want to talk about. It's the reason why they ban books in your country. And it's also the reason why it's so hard for us to find hip hop music that's going to speak to us. But I really think it's that we need to take this creative potential into our own hands. So Picket Fence, if you were making hip hop before, man, yo, we need you.
Yeah, I'm gonna keep doing it. I'm gonna
to
keep
make some new records, man.
Yeah, I'm gonna keep doing it. I've been working on an album for a little over a year now,
There we go.
and my plan is to have several releases next year. I'm not looking for a record deal. I'm just looking to put an alternative for people to listen to, and I'll promote it the best of my ability, so that people will have something else to listen to, just to let people know. And my boy Coolidge has been commenting, we always say that one thing that we can do is, instead of talking about the stuff you don't like, is to start, in regards to music, is to start promoting the things and the artists that you do like. Make sure you share those artists and throw that in your timeline and your news feed. Throw the artists that you do like, the ones that you want to support, even if you can't support them financially all the time. There's nothing to share in a link. That doesn't cost you anything to share a link to their music and their art, So that's one thing that we can do. Lady Bounce will say.
So as we're wrapping this up, and we definitely appreciate your thoughts, David. It's always a pleasure, to talk to you and really trying to reclaim this thing that we call Blackness, or reclaim this music, or reclaim our personhood, which is more of what I'd like to see more of. Because like I was thinking about when you were talking about, music, and like I DJ. So when I DJ, I don't just play quote unquote black music. I play all genres. I play all years. I play the music that speaks to me, the music I grew up on. And that's what makes me, a great DJ. Like, I play the songs that you didn't even know you wanted to hear. Like, oh my God, that was a joint. And then here is this black girl, quote unquote, playing Madonna or playing Talking Heads. And people kind of give me this funny little look like, well, how do you know this? Because great music speaks to me no matter what the genre and the race of the person who puts that music out. So with that being said, when it comes to hip hop especially, it doesn't just look one way or sound one way. And I hate that we're in this pattern right now where hip hop is only this, and it only sounds like this, and it only talks about this, because that to me is not hip hop. One of the things I used to love about hip hop was its freedom of expression. That you can come from nothing and make a song that's just as popular as somebody who came from, the hills and had everything. It's about making music that speaks to the people, and making music that, that is true to yourself, which is one of the things I always, enjoy about like Pickett's music. He's always true to himself as an artist. If it don't speak to him, then he's not going to speak on it, as opposed to, just doing what the masses are doing because that's what's popular, doing like that's the thing. So for different artists, out there, I would encourage any artist, stay true to who you are when you make the music that you make, because somebody's always going to pick it up and somebody's always going to be listening and looking for something that's different than what's always on the shelves, or what is always, shoved down our throats, if you will. Like, I love Beyonce, but I'm oversaturated with Beyonce, and she's not the greatest singer, but some of the singers that sing better than her don't have the machine behind them that she has. Sure. So I make a point, like Pickett said, to look for the artists that speak to me, that make the music that speak to me, and then I promote that, as opposed to, dissing and dogging the things that I don't like and giving that negative shine, on things. Try to maintain that positivity and sharing, what speaks to me. So with that, Sir Pickett, is that our self-care assignment for this week?
Yeah, that sounds like a jewel to me. Yeah. This week's self-care assignment is to promote the things that bring you joy, the artists that brings you joy. Since it's Hip Hop History Month, promote the artists that bring you joy. Don't worry about what's in your news feed. If you like an underground artist, make sure you share their music and how people can purchase their music. Word up.
I like it.
Dope. So that's our show for this week. We want to thank you once again. Now, if you saw the self-care assignment, this is on the fly. This is in rehearse. This is off the fly. But if you saw today's self-care assignment on the page, was about starting a book club. We are starting a book club on the Fly With Us podcast. We're going to start December 1st after Hip Hop History Month. And our first book that we're going to be reading, this gives you a few weeks to go get this book, is David, show him the book again.
Oh, for real? Well, this one is like so racial trauma recovery, healing our past using rhythm and processing. This is a pretty nice book. It is what I do want to say though is that there's also this book as well, Black Meditation, which may be for most people, but if you want to read this one is for clinicians. This one is for people who want to learn how to eliminate racial trauma if you're a trained therapist. But people may like it. But this one also is maybe down the alley as well, because this one is about like skills anybody can use. But I mean, it's really up to you.
Oh, well, that's where we're gonna go. Let's go with the Black Meditation. Meditation. You have that book. I gotta get me a copy. Yeah, I got her that. She has that book.
If there is that, then please let me know. If you're having that book club, I would love to talk with you guys about it after.
Oh yeah, we'll definitely have you. Yeah, that's what we're gonna do. Start December 1st. Black Meditation by David Archer. So it gives you a couple of weeks to go cop that off of Amazon. And we're going to start December 1st. We're going to be discussing that book. So we're going to have you come back again, and we're going to really break down this book. This is off the fly, nothing rehearsed. Like I said, that was today's self-care assignment on the page. And I think that it's really important that we're talking about knowledge today. So let's fill our brains with knowledge. So that's Black Meditation by David Archer. That's on Amazon. Go cop that December 1st. We're going to be talking about that. Word up.
For real, man. Yo, much blessings, many blessings to each and every one of you and to your listeners. Just to remember that we are blessed because we have breath. Okay, that's some bars too that I gotta drop, man. But much appreciation, and looking forward to the next time when we can share the airwaves together. Right?
Definitely appreciate you as always. That's our show for this week. It's your boy Picket Fence.
I'm your girl, Lady Bounce.
We out of here. Peace.
Peace.